Hey guys, Chicky Domain, Debut.com with a Debut.com forecast update. This forecast update effective around 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wednesday, August 28, 2019. And finally, we have our first U.S. threat, real U.S. threat, of a tropical cyclone impacting the United States within about 5 days or so. Start you off with the latest 8 a.m. National Hurricane Center forecast track update for what is now Tropical Storm Dorian down here just to the southeast of Puerto Rico, and is now forecast by the National Hurricane Center to become a possible Category 2 hurricane off the central Florida coast by Labor Day Monday, 2 a.m. With that said, please visit the National Hurricane Center at www.hurricanes.gov for all official watches and warnings. If watches and warnings are issued for your area, please heed the advice of your local, county, state emergency management officials. With that said, we'd like to welcome new followers over to our forecast. We are primarily a surf and marine forecaster covering the North Atlantic Basin. During tropical season, we are tracking tropical cyclones, and during winter season, we're tracking extratropical cyclones, looking for weather systems and or storms that are going to produce high surf and or high seas. So I want to take a minute while we're looking at this and talk about the cone of uncertainty and what the spread is at the 5-day mark. A lot of you who've been following along this morning, I posted that the European model showing Dorian crossing over the central Florida coast. Let's talk about this cone of uncertainty. The cone is pretty certain through here as you get into the 72 and 96 hour period. It's when that 96 and 5-day, the 120, where the margin spreads. That means that, like the National Hurricane Center always says and has said it for years, it is important not to concentrate on the exact track of a hurricane, because in this cone of uncertainty, this means that the hurricane or the tropical cyclone can bounce around anywhere in this cone. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor in here or not, but let's start back here. We know for certain, or for fairly certain, that Dorian is going to move up into here. National Hurricane Center is not going to be that far off within this period of the forecast track. Okay? And then as we get into here, this means that if Dorian makes it into here, there's nothing to say that Dorian can't take the southern edge of the cone, and there's nothing to say that Dorian can't take the northern edge of the cone. The way that we like to look at this cone is, most of you know that how we draw our arrows. You've probably seen it this morning, but if I was to take an arrow and put it in a counterclockwise motion in here, this means that everybody that's in this cone, because Dorian is expected to grow in circumference, this means that even though the eye of the storm will be here off the central Florida coast, it's possible to have tropical storm force winds up in here and heavy rain, tropical storm force winds down in here and heavy rain. What does that mean? That means that tree limbs are probably going to fall and people are going to be without power. So prepare yourself, and please visit the National Hurricane Center at www.hurricanes.gov for all official watches and warning. Remember, turn around, don't drown does not only apply to the pavement, it applies to boaters, it applies to surfers, and anybody interacting with the water. Speaking of which, this weekend, we're going to have higher tides than normal. So not only we're going to have higher tides than normal, we're going to have hurricane storm surge along the East Florida coast. That means inland waterways will probably have water higher than normal. That means you boaters, folks at the docks, you may want to put on some extra string lines, because this thing is coming, guys. And it doesn't matter if it comes just to the south of here or to the north of here. It's important that everyone be prepared. All right, going to switch you over to some imagery now. This is this morning's high-resolution imagery. There's Dorian down here in the bottom right here. And there's some good news coming out this morning. It is possible that Puerto Rico may miss the brunt of the effects of this system. It's funny, 3 to 4 days ago, based on model guidance, we were talking about that the island of Hispaniola would likely destroy the system. Well, 24 hours ago, we had a new center reformation, and that changed the track. And that's why things are highly uncertain when it comes to these systems, because the compactness of the system. But looking at the latest satellite imagery, what we have here is I can't pull this up, and you're probably not going to be able to see it, but up in here at the top, you'll see the naked swirl of what is Tropical Storm Erin. The convective mass is down in here, but all of this stuff in here is now working in tandem with incoming Dorian. And the reason why I say that is, although this image is still, you got to put it into motion in your mind, and we will put some motion into it for you here shortly, but the motion is coming out of the east to the west in here, just like this. We've got vorticity spin like this, and the high pressure ridge is going up like this. So that's that first initial motion. The other thing, switching back up, when we talked about the island of Hispaniola, one of the other variables was that upper level low, or that tut low. Here it is up in here, and it did have influence on Dorian, and that could have been another factor that drew it this way and got it to pull up into here. And we've now crossed that pinnacle of the proverbial fork in the road, guys. If you've been following our forecast along since the beginning of the season, we talk about this being the fork in the road, and the road being the Republica of Dominica in here, RD. And so what happens is, we'll switch it over to the Hebert Box in just a minute, but typically when a system hits the Hebert Box in here, it has two choices of where it's going. It either gets caught in the easterly trades in here, which at one time there was an option that Dorian could do that. Satellite imagery had suggested that, and or once it hits the box in here, it goes towards Florida. Okay, so that's why we call this the fork in the road. There's some other reasons there, and we'll show that to you later on. But if you look into here, notice how this has that curvature in here. Dorian is heading into the Bahamas, and it looks like the Bahamas is not out of the woods. I know the National Hurricane Center has the track a little bit further north, but I think what we'll see as the days come on is that you'll see that South Florida is still into play, and so is Central Florida, and so is North Florida, obviously. The kicker is that the DNA of what was 90L Invest is up in here, north of the Panhandle in here. And what the European model is showing is that this is going to drop into the Gulf of Mexico and retrograde back to the southwest and get in here. And when that happens, the counterclockwise rotation of this, when Dorian gets into here, it's going to feel the influence of that, and it wants to draw it over the state. That's why you saw what you saw in the OOZ Euro last night. So all options are on the table, guys. The biggest thing is the fact of intensity. And right now, with the National Hurricane Center showing a Category 2 hurricane off the central Florida coast, guys, we've been talking about it all season long. It just hasn't happened yet, but the water temperatures are very, very well off to be able to support a strong Category 2 hurricane in here. And I'm not trying to hype, there's nothing to say that intensity can't get stronger if the system was all of a sudden to slow down, stall, or stop in front of this incoming front and not have that influence, or the high pressure ridge in here break down and not steer it further west. There's no telling at the moment, guys. We're just going to have to wait and see until Dorian gets up in here towards the Bahamas. Okay, so I wanted to do a little flashback with you so you can see how we got to this point where we are today with Dorian. Now, this is a flashback to August 17th, 2019. Just last week or 10 days ago. And what we had a tropical wave located right in here that was pushing off towards the west. And I'm going to advance this for you going into the 18th. And you'll see that the fork in the road, and we talk about how the northern extension of tropical waves can split off the main wave axis, get north of Puerto Rico and into the Bahamas. Very similar, described like we're talking about Dorian right now. And then the other part is where the tropical wave, the main axis, can get in here, and the Caribbean Sea and the Western Caribbean Sea interact with that common area of low spin that develops off Costa Rica and Panama and sets up round the corner. All right, now you with me on that? Now round the corner, area spin that develops off Panama, Costa Rica, westward moving tropical wave comes in. It interacts with that area of spin and then sometimes produces cyclogenesis, where the area of spin then spins up into the Gulf of Honduras, where it can either continue to move off towards the west into the East Pacific or up into the western Gulf of Mexico, or what Climo says, up and to the right. Up and to the right. And the reason is for the up and to the right is you typically get an area of spin comes in here, you get a cold front that comes sweeping in here, and that's what picks it up and then sweeps it out towards the North Atlantic. Now let me advance this for you here, and we're going to focus right in here. There's the next day. That area of spin that you just saw here is now down in here, off Costa Rica and Panama. Now watch when I advance to the next day. Where is it now? It's in the Gulf of Honduras. Here's that northern extension in the Bahamas, bumping another day. Here's it crossing over the Yucatan Peninsula. Here comes 98L invest in the Bahamas here. Okay, this is important because, guys, I'm getting ready to show you that the atmosphere can get in a repetitive pattern. Bump the day for you again. Here's 90L invest getting ready to develop over here, or get tagged over here in the western Gulf of Mexico. Now we have 98L invest in the Bahamas and 90L over here in the western Gulf of Mexico. And look, here comes the front to sweep them away. What happened to 98L? 98L lifted up in here, has now become Tropical Storm Erin. 90L came in here, only had a 10% chance of development, but watch what happens here, guys. Oh, let me stop here. I'm sorry for rambling. For those who think that we're crazy with some of the stuff we post, one of the things that we've been posting, if you've been following along, is bow echo. Now, this is not the classic definition or the true definition of what a bow echo is when it comes to meteorology, but I want you to look here. Notice how this has this curvature in here? Bow echo, that's what we call it. This is an easterly push this way, and so this is dragging what's coming off Africa, and here comes the beginning phases of Dorian. We'll get back to that in just a second. Let's go back over here. I'm going to advance. This is going to go August 23rd. Today's the 28th, so this is 5 days ago. Here's 90L pushing up into Texas and Louisiana. Here's 98L trying to get its act together. And for our followers, our surf followers, here's where this northeast swell came in. This obviously was getting ready to set up for the weekend. I'll bump it one more day. But what we had is this front dropping in, and we had a strong northeast fetch that developed up here from Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, and then down here into the Outer Banks. We'll bump that another day for you into August 26th. Here's the beginning phase of Erin, and here's the DNA of 90L invest, and then here comes Dorian down here at the bottom. We're getting closer to real time. I'll bump it again another day for you, and this is yesterday, and look, we have the naked swirl of Tropical Storm Erin, and we have the tail end of that with Dorian down here. Now here comes trajectory. Look at this large-scale pattern that is developing. Look at this huge comma of this area of low pressure. Always watch the tail ends of fronts or long-stalled or dying fronts for an area of low pressure to develop. We have another large area of low pressure sitting over Newfoundland and Nova Scotia that wraps down into the naked swirl of Tropical Storm Erin. Here's her tail end. Where does Dorian want to go? To the tail. right? It's drawn in here. Yes, high pressure ridge, push it west, I heard all that. But I'm talking about fluid dynamics here, guys. The flow is like this way. The flow is like this. We call it when east meets west, right? So there's a clash here. This thing's got nowhere to go but this way. High pressure is going to do it that way. You would think that 98L or Tropical Storm Erin would want to pull it up, which it does. But let me zoom back down in here and we'll go back to the discussion on 90L or the DNA of 90L. Now, mind you, this is yesterday's high res. Today is not out yet. But if you go look at the imagery, this is it right here. And I'm going to switch you over to the European model so you can follow me along. This right here and some of this right here, this is going to drop down into the Gulf of Mexico like this and retrograde back towards the southwest and get a broad area of low pressure spinning in here. And when that does, as Dorian, it's not ironic that this looks like this. If I was to take my red arrow, and I've already posted images this morning of this, this is a forecast position of the National Hurricane Center of where Dorian is supposed to pass, right? And so there's a reason why it looks like this. Let me zoom in a little bit. Almost looks like there's an eye in the Bahamas, right? Look at that. Okay, Dorian's coming here. But what's going to happen is that broad area of low, when it drops down into here and then does this number, that's why the European model wants to take Dorian and bring it this way. Okay, let's show you that in the model. Okay, so here's last night's run, OOZ of the European model. All right, and you guys know that I like to put music or lyrics to what I see in the imagery. The song that comes to mind, when I dip, you dip, we dip, watch what happens here. Focus on what's over North Florida. This is Dorian down in here. This is the low associated with Tropical Storm Erin. Put it into motion for you. Watch this. 24, 48 hours. Notice how the area over Florida dips southwest. And as it dips southwest, what does Dorian do? Lifts up and goes into the Bahamas. Go to 72 hours. There's that broad area of low pressure now in the southeast Gulf of Mexico. And Dorian on the coattails over in the Bahamas at 96 hours. Notice that. The move from the southeast Gulf of Mexico over to the southwest Gulf of Mexico, what does Dorian do? Follows, right? And that's because they're teleconnecting between the two. Right here at 120, give me a second, let me blow this up for you. These two are teleconnecting. Dorian is teleconnecting with the area of low pressure in the western Gulf of Mexico. They are attached here. And then what happens is that this continues to move off towards the west, and the cord gets cut, setting Dorian free. And once the cord gets cut, setting Dorian free, Dorian is free to move up with Climo, and that is up and to the right. Up and to the right. Now, I'm not saying that up and to the left can't happen. I've seen it done before. Probably many of us have. But climatology tells us that when we get a system that comes in here out of Puerto Rico, and we'll show you the Climo map in just a few minutes, is that the system will either come this way and impact Florida, or again, just like we talked about in the Hebert Box, move through the Caribbean Sea into the western Gomex and then get over here. Bear with me a second, I got to zoom back out. And then we'll take you through the rest of the model run. Mind you guys, there is not a lot of confidence outside 5 days, so when we get to the 10-day mark, just throw it out for right now. But I'm just showing you what the model is suggesting going into the 10-day mark. All right, so here we go. I'll back it up. There's the southwest drop, Dorian lifting up, the move towards the Gulf of Mexico. These two become attached at the hip. When I dip, you dip, we dip. Cross Florida, up into the Big Bend area, and then up and to the right, up towards the Outer Banks. Now, mind you guys, this is 10 days, okay? And I'm going to drop this down a little bit because the Europeans been on this day after day after day. And look down here. Here comes the shot at the next two systems, Ferdinand and Gabrielle. I've been calling her Gabby. Okay, and if you go back a couple weeks ago, we talked about in order for the National Hurricane Center's new seasonal forecast update to verify as far as numbers of storm, they're running out of the calendar days. And so in order for it to verify, we're going to have to start seeing multiple storms. Okay, well, we just had Aaron. Here's Dorian. Here comes a shot at two more. But what's worrisome about this picture right here, give me 1 second, let me flip over to it. Okay, take you back to a flashback. This is August 22nd, 90L invest in the Gulf of Mexico, and 98L over here in the Bahamas. Dorian is not in the picture, but what I'm trying to tell you is that sometimes, like in history, weather will repeat itself. And that's why there's the thing called a repetitive pattern. A lot of times the atmosphere can tip its hand of what's coming next. And when you go to look at the European model, you see these two vorticities in here. It's possible, and I'm not trying to hype, guys, I'm just trying to give you my experience on what I have seen and what I have known to be true, is that we could be looking at two more systems coming up, one in the Gulf of Mexico and another one in the Bahamas after Dorian. All right, that's all I got for you for now, guys. I'm pushed for time. Stay tuned. I will be doing another video update. Keep in mind, sorry if I've rambled. It's my first video update of the season, I think. I don't think I've done a video in 2019, at least from the official start date of the season. Next, I'll tell you, I mentioned debut.com. Guys, it's been forever and a day since I posted anything on the website, but I may do so starting probably tomorrow, just so that there's more clarification in exactly what I have been saying. If you have not seen my pinned tweet, please go to Twitter. If you're on Twitter, read the pinned tweet. We started off with lots of uncertainty ahead. I mean, read through it, guys. Nothing has changed there. There's still lots of uncertainty ahead. But what's most important is, please do not focus on the exact track of what looks to be Hurricane Dorian off the Florida coast coming up. It's going to affect a lot of people if the forecast models, the National Hurricane Center, and what I'm seeing verifies. Stay tuned.